After 9 minutes underwater, the Omega saved the Alpha King's Luna and became family that night. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. Emily Williams, the Luna, was always under the protection of her Alpha King, Jackson Reed. Beautiful, strong-willed, and fiercely loyal, Emily held a place of honor in their world. But her life, though surrounded by power and prestige, wasn't without its challenges. In this world, Alpha Kings ruled with authority, and Omega individuals, like Olivia Brown, were often seen as the weakest, the ones who followed orders without question. Olivia, however, was far from weak. She carried a quiet strength within her, a power that many overlooked. She had been through struggles and battles, but most of her life was spent staying in the shadows. That was, until the day Emily's life was on the line. It all began with a storm. The winds howled as a raging sea swirled around them, and Emily found herself in the clutches of danger. A sudden shift in the tides caused her boat to capsize, plunging her deep into the unforgiving waters. She fought to stay afloat, her strength slowly waning as the cold, dark waters surrounded her. Desperate, Emily screamed for help, her voice lost to the storm. But there was someone listening. Olivia had been nearby, sensing something wasn't right. She had been keeping an eye on Emily for some time, though the Luna didn't know it. Olivia didn't hesitate. She dove into the turbulent sea, her heart racing but determined. With a swimmer's grace, she reached Emily just as the Luna was about to lose consciousness. Olivia's strength was unlike anything Emily had ever experienced. With precise movements and unspoken understanding, Olivia pulled her to safety. 9 minutes under the water had passed, and in those 9 minutes, Olivia had saved Emily's life. When they reached the shore, Emily's breathing was shallow, her body shaking from exhaustion and cold, but she was alive. Olivia stayed by her side, keeping her warm as they waited for help. It was in that moment that something shifted between them. Emily, once a symbol of power, saw Olivia for who she truly was, not just an Omega, but a force to be reckoned with. Jackson, the Alpha King, arrived soon after, his anger and worry evident. But seeing Olivia, not just as a servant but as a savior, caused something to stir within him. He had always believed the Omegas were to be protected, but never had he imagined they could be this strong. That night, as the three of them sat together, a new understanding was born. Olivia was no longer just an outsider. She was family. And for Emily and Jackson, that was just the beginning. The storm had passed, and the night sky had settled into a blanket of silence, with only the distant hum of the ocean breaking the stillness. Emily, now safe on the shore, was starting to regain her strength. She sat wrapped in a thick blanket, her body still trembling from the cold, but her mind racing. Her gaze lingered on Olivia, who had been by her side since the moment of rescue. Olivia, the Omega, was not what Emily had expected. Far from being the fragile, meek figure she had imagined, Olivia exuded a quiet confidence. There was something about her that made Emily feel a deep sense of gratitude, and perhaps something more. As the hours passed, and Emily's body warmed, she began to reflect on everything that had happened. She had always lived her life surrounded by power, ruled by the expectations of being a Luna, but tonight, everything had shifted. She had seen the true strength of an Omega, a strength that had saved her life. Jackson, her Alpha King, had returned to the castle in the aftermath of the storm, but his thoughts were consumed with worry, not for Emily alone, but for the implications of what had transpired. Olivia had saved Emily, something he never would have expected from someone like her. The Alpha King was known for his resolute beliefs, and yet, the events of the night had shaken him. When he saw Olivia sitting by Emily's side, his first instinct was to protect her as he always had. But there was an unspoken understanding in the room that things had changed. Olivia was no longer just an outsider. She was part of their world now. After a long silence, Jackson finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "Olivia," he began, his gaze fixed on the Omega. You did something tonight that none of us could have expected. You saved Emily's life. Olivia met his gaze, unwavering. I did what anyone would do. I saw her in danger, and I acted. It was the only thing I could do. Jackson was quiet for a moment, studying her. He had always seen the Omegas as subordinates, those to be protected and kept in their place. But tonight, Olivia had shown him a different side, a side he had never truly considered. She had risked everything for Emily, and that made her more than just an Omega in his eyes. Emily, still wrapped in her blanket, looked between the two of them. She could feel the tension in the air, but also something else, something new. There was a bond forming between them, one that was built on respect, not hierarchy. As the night wore on, Emily's thoughts drifted. She had been in a world of luxury and status, but now, she saw a new path before her. One where strength didn't come from power alone, but from courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to stand up for what was right. Olivia had shown her that, and Emily was beginning to understand that the true strength of an Omega was not in submission, but in their ability to protect, to fight for those they loved. Jackson, too, seemed to be changing. His gaze softened as he watched Emily and Olivia, his mind clearly racing with his own thoughts. The three of them sat in silence for a while, and for the first time in a long time, there was no need for words. The bond that had been formed that night was stronger than any spoken declaration. It was a bond built on action, on the willingness to risk everything for another. Olivia, once an outsider, was now a part of their family. Emily could feel it deep inside her, a shift, a new chapter in her life that was just beginning. The storm may have passed, but what it had left in its wake was something far more powerful, a bond that would define them all in ways they hadn't yet realized. The days that followed were filled with a sense of change in the air, as if the world around Emily had shifted, and with it, so had she. She had always known the luxury of being the Luna, the one who was cared for, the one who never had to worry about where her next meal would come from or who would protect her. But now, something inside her had awakened, and it was not just gratitude for Olivia's actions, but a deeper understanding of the strength that lay in the bonds they were beginning to form. Jackson had been quiet for the past few days, but Emily could feel the shift in him, too. He was not the same alpha king he had been before the storm. He had always carried an air of authority, but now there was something more, an uncertainty, perhaps, or the realization that the world he ruled was not as clear-cut as he had once thought. Olivia, for her part, was more present in their lives than she had ever been. She was no longer just a background figure, someone to be protected, but someone who stood alongside them as an equal. It was an adjustment for everyone, but one that Emily could feel was necessary. Olivia's quiet strength was undeniable, and it made her reconsider everything she had known about power and vulnerability. They spent the days in the castle, talking and getting to know each other better. Jackson was still figuring out what his new role was in this changed dynamic, but Emily saw something in him now that she had never noticed before, a softness, a willingness to listen and learn, especially from Olivia. It was a far cry from the man who had once been so certain of his place in the world. One evening, as the sun set over the castle grounds, Emily, Jackson, and Olivia gathered on the balcony to watch the sky turn orange and purple. The tension from the days before had lessened, and they found themselves in a rare moment of peace. Emily leaned against the railing, looking out at the horizon. "I never realized how much we take for granted," she said softly. "The things we think we understand about people, about strength. I've always been surrounded by power, but Olivia, you've shown me that true strength comes from within, from the courage to stand up when everything is against you." Olivia, who had been standing a few steps away, turned to face her, her expression calm but knowing. "It's not always about what you can do physically. Sometimes it's about what you're willing to risk, what you're willing to lose for those you care about." Jackson nodded, his eyes still focused on the view in front of them. He was silent for a long moment, his thoughts heavy. Finally, he spoke. "I was wrong. I've always believed that Omegas were weaker, that they were there to be protected. But I see now that I was wrong. I see now that true strength doesn't lie in power or position. It lies in the choices we make, in the sacrifices we're willing to make for each other." Emily smiled softly, feeling a warmth in her chest as she looked between the two of them. She had never thought she would see this day, the day when the divide between Alpha and Omega, between the powerful and the seemingly weak, would blur into something more. She reached out and took Olivia's hand, then Jackson's, holding them both tightly. "We are stronger together," she said quietly, her voice full of conviction. Jackson looked at her, his gaze softening. "Yes, we are." The silence that followed was filled with a sense of understanding, of peace that had eluded them all for so long. In that moment, they knew that their bond had become something far more meaningful than what they had ever imagined. They were no longer defined by their roles, by their titles, or by the expectations of the world around them. They were family, something far stronger than anything else. And as the night stretched on, they stood together, watching the stars emerge in the sky, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it as one. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Emily, Jackson, and Olivia grew stronger. What had started as a moment of crisis had blossomed into something unexpected, something beautiful. Emily had never imagined that her life would change so drastically in such a short amount of time. The once rigid roles of Alpha, Omega, and Luna had blurred, and in their place was a new dynamic, one built on respect, trust, and understanding. Jackson was still the Alpha King, but he no longer carried the weight of that title alone. Emily had always stood by him, but now she felt as though they were standing together, equal partners, each bringing their own strengths to the table. Olivia, the Omega, had become a part of their family in ways no one had anticipated. She was no longer just a protector or someone to be looked after. She was their equal, their ally, and above all, someone who had earned their respect. One afternoon, as Emily walked through the castle gardens, she found Olivia sitting by the fountain, her gaze distant but peaceful. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden light across the flowers and the water. Emily approached slowly, not wanting to disturb the quiet moment. "Hey," she said softly, sitting beside her. Olivia looked up, offering a small smile. "Hey, it's a beautiful evening, isn't it?" Emily nodded, glancing around. "It is. I was just thinking about how different things are now." Olivia raised an eyebrow, curious. "Different how?" Emily hesitated, collecting her thoughts. "I've spent so much of my life focusing on the role I had to play, the expectations placed on me. I never realized how much I was missing by not truly seeing the people around me for who they were." Olivia's expression softened. "You're not the only one. I spent my life trying to fit into a role that was given to me, not knowing who I really was outside of it. But I think we all have the chance to choose who we want to be now." Emily smiled, her heart feeling lighter than it had in a long time. "You're right. I never realized how much we were all just following what we thought we should be, instead of what we could become." The two women sat in silence for a moment, the sound of the water in the fountain adding a sense of tranquility to the moment. Eventually, Olivia spoke again. "Do you think things will ever go back to the way they were?" Emily looked at her, considering the question. "No, I don't think they will. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think this is what it was always supposed to be." A sense of contentment settled between them as the evening continued to unfold. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt at peace with the changes that had come into her life. She no longer felt the weight of expectations bearing down on her. She had found something much more valuable, a sense of true connection, not just to Jackson, but to Olivia as well. Later that evening, when they gathered for dinner, Jackson joined them in the garden. He looked at Emily and Olivia, a soft smile playing on his lips. "I was just thinking," he began, his tone thoughtful. "We've all been through a lot these past few weeks, but I feel like we've come out stronger on the other side. Not just as individuals, but as a family." Emily's eyes softened as she looked at him. "I agree. We've learned so much from each other. We've grown," Olivia added, her voice quiet but strong. "It's amazing how much we can learn when we open ourselves up to change." Jackson nodded, his eyes filled with a newfound understanding. "I used to think strength was just about power, about being the one in control. But now, I know it's about something much deeper. It's about the bonds we build, the trust we have in each other." Emily smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "We are stronger together," she said softly. Jackson reached out, taking her hand in his. Olivia did the same, and for a moment, they were all connected, not by titles or roles, but by something far more profound. The world outside their little circle might still see them in terms of Alpha and Omega, Luna and King, but inside their hearts, they were just family, bound by love, trust, and the strength of their shared journey. And as they sat there, together under the fading light of the evening, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. Weeks passed since the night that had changed everything. The seasons shifted, and with it, the atmosphere within the castle had transformed. Emily, Jackson, and Olivia found themselves growing not just in strength, but in understanding. Their days were filled with discussions, sometimes quiet, sometimes heated, about their roles, their pasts, and what the future would hold. There was still much to learn, but one thing had become certain. They were no longer just individuals bound by duty. They had become a family, united not just by their shared experiences, but by their willingness to accept each other's differences. Emily stood by the large window overlooking the garden one afternoon, watching as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. It was a peaceful moment, one that she had longed for, and yet, it felt like the calm before another storm. As much as things had changed for the better, there was still a lingering tension in the air. Jackson had been quieter than usual, his brow furrowed in deep thought. Emily had noticed it more than once, the way he would stand by the window, lost in his own world. She knew something was on his mind. He was always the protector, the one who shouldered the weight of the world. But now, Emily understood that he, too, was learning to let go of the old ways. She walked over to him, standing silently for a moment before speaking. "Jackson, you've been quiet lately," she said softly. He turned to her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes told a different story. "I've been thinking," he admitted, his voice low, "about everything. About how we've all changed, how the world outside is watching us. I've always been in control, always had the answers. But now," he paused, unsure how to continue. Emily stepped closer, gently taking his hand. "Now you're realizing that control isn't everything. That strength comes from within, and it's the bonds we create that matter most," she said, her voice steady with understanding. Jackson's gaze softened, and for the first time in weeks, he let out a long breath. "Yes, and I'm not sure how to navigate this new world. But I know one thing for certain. I don't want to go back to the way things were. I don't want to rule with fear or authority alone." Emily smiled, squeezing his hand. "And you don't have to. We're in this together, all three of us. There's no one path, no one way of doing things. We'll find our way, together." Jackson nodded, the weight on his shoulders lightening for the first time in a long while. "Together," he echoed softly. As they stood there, the weight of the moment settled in. It wasn't just about them. It was about the future they were building, one where trust and understanding came before power and control. It was about equality, about creating a space where each person's strength was acknowledged, no matter their title. That evening, Olivia joined them for dinner, her presence a steady calm in the room. The three of them sat at the long table, sharing stories, laughter, and moments of silence. Olivia had become not just a part of their family, but a vital piece of it. Her quiet strength, her wisdom, had become a guiding force in their lives. Emily watched her as she spoke, realizing how far they had all come. Once, Olivia had been a stranger to her, someone who existed on the outskirts of her world. Now, she was an equal, someone they all looked to with respect. Jackson, too, had changed. The man who had once ruled with certainty and authority now carried himself with a quiet humility, willing to learn and grow alongside the people he loved. It was a journey they had all taken together, and though the road ahead was still uncertain, they knew they would face it as one. The castle, once a symbol of power and authority, had become a home, warm, filled with love, and built on the foundation of respect. It was a new beginning, one where they were free to be who they truly were, without the weight of the world bearing down on them. They were no longer defined by their titles, their roles, or their pasts. They were simply a family, stronger together than they had ever been apart. The days that followed were a mixture of growth, learning, and the quiet acceptance of their new roles. For the first time, Emily, Jackson, and Olivia weren't just playing the roles that fate had assigned them. They were creating their own path, a path that none of them had ever expected. Emily often found herself reflecting on how far they had all come. She had once thought of herself as the Luna, bound by her title and the expectations that came with it. But now, she saw herself as something more, a leader in her own right, an equal among the people she loved. It wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever, but she had Jackson and Olivia beside her, offering their support and their strength. Jackson had been a steady presence throughout it all. As the Alpha King, he had always carried the burden of leadership with the quiet assurance of someone who knew their place in the world. But now, he was learning to let go of that need for control, understanding that leadership wasn't just about power. It was about understanding, empathy, and above all, trust. He often found himself turning to Emily, relying on her perspective as they navigated this new dynamic. There were moments when he would catch her gaze across the room, and without a word, they both knew what the other was thinking. Olivia, too, had found her place in this new world. Once seen as someone who existed only in the background, she was now a cornerstone of their family. Her quiet strength and wisdom had become a guiding force for both Emily and Jackson. They had learned to value her not just for what she had done for them, but for who she was. The Omega who had once been overlooked was now the one they turned to for guidance when they were uncertain. One afternoon, Emily and Jackson found themselves in the garden again, the air cool with the promise of autumn. They walked side by side, the silence between them comfortable, easy. Jackson glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "You know, I never imagined things would turn out like this," he said, his voice soft. Emily smiled, her gaze drifting to the colorful leaves drifting from the trees. "Neither did I, but I'm glad they did." Jackson nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I've always thought of strength as something you can see, something you can feel. But I've come to realize that true strength is in the way we support each other, in how we face the challenges that come our way." Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with a newfound understanding. It's not about fighting for control or proving who's stronger. It's about standing together, no matter what. Jackson stopped walking for a moment, turning to face her fully. "You've changed me, Emily. You've helped me see things differently. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that whatever happens, we'll face it together." Emily's heart swelled as she reached out to take his hand. "We will, and we'll be ready for whatever comes next." Later that evening, they gathered once again in the castle's dining room, this time with Olivia joining them at the table. The room was filled with laughter and light-hearted conversation, the weight of the past few weeks feeling far away. It was a rare moment of peace, one they cherished. As they ate, Olivia spoke of the changes she had witnessed in both Emily and Jackson. "You two have grown so much," she said, her voice full of quiet pride. "It's been incredible to watch. You've not only found strength in each other, but in yourselves, too." Emily smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "I think we're all still learning," she said, glancing at Jackson. "But we're doing it together. And that's the most important thing." Jackson nodded, his eyes meeting Olivia's. Together, he agreed. The night went on, filled with laughter and stories, and for the first time, there was a sense of peace that hadn't been there before. They were no longer the Luna, the Alpha King, and the Omega. They were a family, bound not by titles, but by love, trust, and the shared understanding that no matter where their journey took them, they would face it together. And in that moment, as they sat around the table, there was nothing more they needed. They were home. The days that followed were filled with a sense of calm that none of them had expected. Emily, Jackson, and Olivia had found a balance in their lives, one that was built on mutual understanding and trust. They spent more time together, not just as ruler and subject, but as equals, learning from each other and growing stronger in their bond. The castle, once a place of tension and expectation, had become a home. Emily often found herself reflecting on the changes in their lives. She could no longer imagine her old life, the one where she had been confined by the title of Luna, always expected to stand beside Jackson, to be a symbol of grace and power. Now, she was more than that. She was a partner, an equal, and she had Olivia by her side. The changes in Jackson were just as profound. The Alpha King, once sure of himself and his power, had learned to let go of the need for control. He was still the leader, still the one who made the tough decisions, but now he did so with the input of those he loved and trusted. He had learned to listen, to respect the opinions of Emily and Olivia, and to accept that strength was not just about power, but about humility and love. One evening, as they sat together in the garden, the moonlight casting a soft glow over the flowers and trees, Emily turned to Jackson. "I've been thinking," she said softly, her voice full of warmth, "about everything we've been through. How much we've all changed." Jackson looked at her, his expression serious but gentle. "I've been thinking about that too. I never imagined that letting go of the old ways would feel so freeing." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with affection. "It's strange, isn't it? To realize that we don't have to be defined by our titles, by the roles we've been given." Jackson nodded, his hand gently resting on hers. "It's something I'm still coming to terms with. But I'm starting to see that what matters most is the people around us. You, Olivia, we're a team. And together, we can face anything." Olivia, who had been sitting nearby, looked up from the book she had been reading. She had grown used to the quiet conversations between Emily and Jackson, the bond that had formed between them. But today, something about their words struck her differently. She smiled softly, closing the book. "You two are right. The old ways have their place, but they don't define us. What we build together, the trust and love we share, that's what makes us stronger." Emily reached out, taking Olivia's hand in hers. "We're family now," she said softly. "Not because of what we're supposed to be, but because of who we've chosen to become." Jackson, who had been quiet for a moment, finally spoke again. "I used to think that being an alpha meant doing everything on my own. But now, I realize that it's not about carrying the weight alone. It's about sharing it with those you love." The three of them sat in silence for a while, the moon high above, casting its silver light over the garden. It was a peaceful moment, a quiet recognition of how far they had come. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Emily felt a deep sense of calm knowing that whatever challenges lay before them, they would face them together. They had built something far stronger than just a family. They had built a foundation of trust, love, and unity that would guide them through whatever the future held. And for the first time, Emily knew that whatever came next, she would never have to face it alone. As the seasons continued to change, so did their lives. The once delicate balance of their relationship had transformed into something firm, unshakable. Emily, Jackson, and Olivia had settled into a rhythm, each understanding their place in this newfound family. While they still carried their individual roles, the dynamics of power had shifted in a way none of them had imagined. Emily had begun to realize that her life was not just about supporting Jackson as his Luna, but also about growing into her own power and voice. She wasn't simply there to stand beside him. She was a force in her own right, with thoughts, feelings, and desires that mattered. It had been a gradual process, but she had come to embrace the idea of equality in her relationship. Jackson had come a long way as well. The king who had once ruled with authority now understood the importance of compromise and collaboration. He still held the reins of leadership, but he did so with a newfound humility. His partnership with Emily and Olivia had shown him that power didn't always have to come from control. Sometimes, it came from understanding and the willingness to listen. Olivia, who had once been seen as an outsider, had found a sense of belonging. The Omega who had saved Emily's life in those crucial moments was now an integral part of their lives. She had stepped into her strength and was no longer the silent figure in the background. Her wisdom and insight had become indispensable, not just to Emily and Jackson, but to the entire household. Olivia's quiet strength complemented Jackson's leadership and Emily's compassion. Together, they had built a family, and though their journey had not been easy, it had been worth every step. One evening, the three of them gathered in the garden once again. The soft hum of evening crickets filled the air as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden. It was a moment of peace, one that they had come to cherish. Jackson leaned against the stone wall, his hands resting in his pockets as he looked over at Emily and Olivia. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice steady, "about how much has changed in such a short time. I never expected any of this. The world I thought I knew has shifted completely." Emily turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "We've all changed," she said quietly. "It's not just the world that's different. It's us, too. And I think that's okay. It's better than okay. It's necessary." Olivia nodded in agreement. "It's funny, isn't it? How the hardest moments bring out the most growth. The things we thought we needed to survive were never the things that really mattered." Jackson looked at them both, a soft smile forming on his lips. "I was so focused on maintaining control, on making sure everything stayed the way it was supposed to. But now, I see that letting go was the only way to truly grow. Emily reached out, taking his hand in hers. We've all let go of the old ways. But what we've built instead is something far stronger. Jackson's eyes softened as he looked at Olivia, then at Emily. We've built something that can't be broken, something that's stronger than anything I could have imagined. There was a long pause, a moment of quiet reflection between them all. The moonlight was soft against their faces, casting a gentle glow on the garden. The weight of the past had lifted, and for the first time in a long time, they felt truly at peace. Olivia's voice broke the silence, her words soft, but full of conviction. We've created something special, something that can't be torn apart by anything the world throws at us. Emily smiled, her heart swelling with pride. And we'll face everything together, she said firmly. As a family. Jackson nodded, squeezing Emily's hand. Together, the three of them stood there, side by side, in the soft moonlight. Their bond was unbreakable, built on love, trust, and mutual respect. The road ahead was still uncertain, but they knew one thing for sure. No matter what came their way, they would face it together, united as a family. The future was theirs to shape, and they would shape it together, stronger than ever. The days passed peacefully, but Emily, Jackson, and Olivia knew that change was always just around the corner. While the calm moments they had shared were precious, the world outside their castle walls was never static. They understood that their newfound unity was both a strength and a vulnerability. The connection they had forged, the bond that had transformed their lives, was something they needed to protect. It was a reminder that no matter how much they had grown, the challenges of the outside world were still there, waiting. One evening, as they gathered in the castle's library, a sense of restlessness filled the air. The trio sat around a large wooden table, the soft light from the fireplace flickering over their faces. Jackson was the first to break the silence. "We can't stay here forever," he said, his voice calm but serious. "The world is changing, and we need to be ready for whatever comes next. We've created something powerful, but we can't ignore what's happening outside these walls." Emily looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "I know. The balance we've found here, it feels right, but I understand that we can't isolate ourselves. We have to think beyond just us. We have to think about the future, about everyone." Olivia, who had been quietly listening, nodded. "I agree. We've built something strong here, but if we're to truly make a difference, we need to take action. It's not enough to protect what we have. We need to be the ones shaping the future, not just waiting for it to unfold." Jackson leaned forward, his eyes meeting theirs. "So what do we do next?" The question hung in the air, heavy with possibility. They all knew the answer, though it wasn't easy to admit. Their path forward wasn't just about protecting their home. It was about stepping into the world with confidence, using their bond and their strength to create something greater. Emily took a deep breath. "We've been given a chance, all three of us. A chance to lead, not just in our own lives, but for the people who need us. We have to be the ones to make a difference, to show them what true leadership looks like." Jackson nodded, his gaze steady. "You're right. Leadership isn't about power. It's about making the world a better place for everyone." Olivia added, "And we can't do that by staying hidden away. We've already seen the strength we have when we work together. Now it's time to take that strength and use it to change things." There was a silence as they all processed the weight of the decision. They had spent so long learning about themselves, understanding each other, and building a life based on love and trust. But now, the time had come to step beyond the safety of their home. They couldn't remain isolated from the world forever. They were ready to take the next step, to fight for a future that they could shape with their own hands. The castle no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like the starting point of something much larger. The bond they had formed wasn't just a shield from the outside world. It was the foundation for the change they were about to make. Emily stood and looked at Jackson and Olivia. "Let's do this," she said, her voice full of resolve. "Together, we can make a real difference. We've already changed our world. Now it's time to change the world beyond these walls." Jackson stood with her, his hand reaching out to hers. Together, he agreed. Olivia smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "Together," she repeated, her voice filled with certainty. The three of them stood side by side, ready for whatever the future held. It wasn't just about protecting what they had anymore. It was about creating a future for everyone. And together, They knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead.